Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Sir, are you trying to offer an opinion suggesting that Miss Reed's Lexus never hit John O'Keefe on January 29, 2022?
I'll allow it. Is that what you're doing?
Is that your opinion?
No, sir.
Are you offering an opinion that Miss Reed's Lexus never got in a collision before?
The way I stated it was none of the prior events were triggered by a collision.
What I'm asking you, are you offering an opinion that Miss Reed's Lexus never got into a collision before January 29, 2022, or on that day?
No.
So when you were talking about collisions to the jury, you weren't making any suggestion that that Lexus was not in a collision, are you?
I think you threw a double negative in there. Can you just clarify what you meant? Yeah.
You are not suggesting to this jury that Miss Reed's Lexus did not ever get in a collision before.
No.
You're just saying that there's no data on the text string to suggest a collision.
Specifically, none of the events were triggered by a collision. That's
Text stream data can be triggered by a number of different things other than a collision. Isn't that true?
correct.
And in fact, when you talk about text stream data, you know that text stream data does not record a collision. You know that.
A collision is not one of the triggers. That's correct.
Right. So when you were saying it wasn't triggered by a collision, it's never going to be triggered by a collision ever on text stream data.
Not the collision in and of itself, correct?
Right. Right. So there's other things that will trigger text stream data,
Correct.
like sudden acceleration.
The only acceleration trigger that I'm aware of on text stream is if there's a large acceleration during what Lexus calls a PCS, or a pre-collision safety event. But a large acceleration on its own, I do not believe is one of the triggers.
Are you sure you know a lot about text stream data?
Yes.
Sustained.
Do you know a lot about text stream data?
Yes.
And you're saying that if a car accelerates over 30%, in and of itself wouldn't initiate a trigger?
I'm not sure I understand.
You just said pre-collision is the only time sudden acceleration, from your perspective, would cause a triggering event. Now, I'm asking you,
I'm allowing this.
if someone accelerated Ms. Reed's Lexus at over 30% acceleration, would that cause a triggering event?
I am not sure what you mean by 30% acceleration.
Accelerator? 30%.
Accelerator pedal.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of triggers. There's a number of ways that these VCH events can be triggered based on the accelerator pedal angle. I think, is that, yeah.
And what is the percentage from your experience that would create a triggering event?
There's various. Toyota, Lexus calls it high, medium to high is what they put it.
Do you have a number? Do you know the actual data on what percent of depressing the accelerator on the same Lexus as Ms. Reed's would create a triggering event? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact percentage down to this percentage point, no.
There is something different than the text stream data. That's the EDR data, correct?
Yes.
You would not expect, it would be abnormal for the EDR to register data based on a side swipe between a 6,000-pound Lexus and a 216-pound person, wouldn't it?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
That would be abnormal to register that data in the EDR, wouldn't it?
I don't know if I would use the word abnormal, but I would state it that there's a minimum threshold to record in the EDR, and a pedestrian impact generally wouldn't meet that.
I'm sorry.
A pedestrian impact generally wouldn't meet that, but I don't want to make a blanket statement as if it's always the
You're
case.
saying it would meet that?
Would not.
Would not. Okay. And a side swipe or a clip has less force and impact than a head-on collision, depending on the speed, correct?
Generally, yes.
When you are discussing the triggering event, that is the moment that something registers to the car to capture data in the text stream, correct?
Correct.
So if I was to suggest 30% of depressing the accelerator pedal would cause a triggering event, would the triggering event be when it reaches 30%?
Yes.
The event data captures potentially part of an event, doesn't it?
I think we're into semantics a little bit, and I think it depends on what you mean by event.
Exactly.
Because previously we'd been talking about an event as the data, but event can mean a lot of other things.
If an event's only 3 seconds long and 10 seconds of data is captured, then the data will capture more than the event, correct?
Correct.
If the event is longer, 15 seconds, 20, 25 seconds, and the data is only captured for 10, the text stream data only captures part of the event.
Correct.
Fair to say?
Very fair.
So when you're looking at the data, it doesn't tell you about the entire event, correct?
The data only tells us about the window of time the data captures. There's no way to know beyond that from the data.
All of your equations and pluses and minuses and graphs you're talking about deal with the 10-second text stream data that was captured, correct?
They deal with event 1162.2, right, and the 10 seconds it's comprised of. Actually, they really just deal with the end of the event. That's what everything in the Aperture report's referenced.
Fair enough. But it doesn't deal with anything that could potentially happen after those 10 seconds, does it?
No.
Or anything before?
No, it does not.
The triggering event is spot in the middle, captures 5 seconds before, 5 seconds after.
Approximately 5 seconds. It's not exact.
And you would have to look elsewhere for evidence to know what might have happened before. Yes?
Correct.
And you'd have to look elsewhere for evidence to see or determine what happened after.
Yes.
Do you know at the end of this triggering event, that 10-second window of data, do you know what happened with the defendant's Lexus after that 10-second of data?
No,
You have no idea, right?
I don't.
Okay. I want to just ask you some questions about your background and then leading into this case, if I could. You have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree.
That's correct.
You've worked for your company for some time.
Coming up on 13 years next month. Correct.
You've advanced through the company.
Yes.
You presently are the director of engineering.
Yes.
Are you ACTAR certified?
No.
What is ACTAR?
ACTAR is a body that basically offers a certification in accident reconstruction.
Do you offer services as an accident reconstructionist?
Sometimes.
And you have been hired and come into court and offer opinions as an accident reconstructionist?
In the singular time I've testified in court, it was not specifically for accident reconstruction, it was data analysis.
You continue your education and you go to a number of different trainings and seminars as well as teach, correct?
Regularly.
And when you regularly go to continuing education, you have quite a bit of continuing education that you've been through, haven't you?
Sorry?
You've been through quite a bit of continuing education.
Yes.
You focus as part of your specialty on EDRs, don't you?
That's correct.
Event data recorders.
Correct.
In fact, when you promote your services, that's one of your real specialty, isn't it?
Correct.
And it's something that not only are you schooled on and you go through continuing education, you're well published, aren't you?
That's correct.
And in your publications, you speak primarily about EDR type information.
Yes.
And that's something you are well skilled in, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, forensics or data forensics is a wide field, isn't it?
It is.
And you can do some things or many things in it, but oftentimes people specialize in parts of data forensics, don't they?
Generally, yes.
Well, speaking of you, you specialize in EDRs, true?
Yes.
There is a difference in different subspecialties, isn't there?
In general,
Oh, yes.
yes.
Okay. Now, are cell phones, is that a subspecialty in digital forensics?
Yes.
Is that something you're a specialist in?
No.
iPhones, are you a specialist in iPhones?
No.
Have you ever taken any specific training on mobile forensics?
No.
Have you ever written any papers on mobile forensics?
No.
Hey, have you ever promoted yourself of having any type of subspecialty as an expert in mobile forensics?
Never.
In any of your continuing education, and you have a vast amount, have you ever taken any classes or seminars in mobile forensics?
No.
Have you ever taken any class or study about variances between infotainment systems and mobile forensics?
Classes? No.
Have you ever attended any seminars on variances relative to mobile forensics?
No.
Have you ever testified about variances in mobile forensics before you testified in this court today?
No.
Have you ever published anything to do with variances in mobile forensics?
No.
In this case, you had an opportunity to review a number of reports from Dr. Judd Welcher, yes?
Yes.
And Mr. Shannon Burgess?
Correct.
In reviewing those reports, you've offered your opinions and analysis. Did you ever engage in actually any efforts or study in this case to obtain data?
Could you maybe clarify what specifically you're asking?
Yes. Did you ever yourself, not watch someone else do it, did you ever download or obtain data in this case?
No.
Did you ever test Miss Reed's car?
No.
Did you ever get an exemplar vehicle to run any tests?
I did not.
Did you ever do any actual testing in this case?
No.
And so your role is to look at other people's work and offer opinions and criticisms, basically.
And provide some clarity to the work, but generally, yes.
Clarity for who? Who asked you to provide clarity?
My clients in this case.
You what?
Mr. Jackson,
Okay.
my client.
Did you ever speak to me?
No.
As an expert, when you analyze data, whether you actively got it yourself or not, do you ever give an opinion in paper called a report? You ever write a report?
Yes.
And you've seen reports in this case that you've looked at, correct?
Correct.
A number of reports by Mr. Burgess,
Correct.
report by Dr. Welcher,
Also correct.
reports that you're critiquing, right?
Correct.
Did you see Ian Whiffin's reports?
I did not.
How about Jessica Hyde? Did you see her reports?
I did not.
You were asked to consider information from Mr. Whiffin's report.
No.
Well, you were asked to assume that the last user interaction on John O'Keefe's cell phone was 12/32/09.
That was stated in Dr. Welcher's report, so I started my analysis at that level.
So none of the information did you actually personally go and vet or analyze or make any determinations about. You're just critiquing written reports.
Correct.
Well, as an expert coming into court and testifying and having opinions, you put together a PowerPoint, didn't you?
Yes.
Why didn't you ever put together a report to share the basis of your opinions and the process you went through to arrive at your opinions before you came into court?
Primarily, I wasn't asked to, so I didn't do it. I wouldn't commission work without being asked to do it. And number two, the extent of my work beyond building the PowerPoint was just basic addition, just adding numbers together that already existed in the Aperture reports. So there wasn't a tremendous amount of complexity to what I engaged in.
What about your work product and your calculations? Did you do all this in your head, or did you type it out and go through a computer program? How did you do it?
I used a calculator for most of it, and the tables in my PowerPoint were generated in Excel, which has some calculation capabilities.
Were you ever asked not to write a report?
No.
You had provided an initial PowerPoint,
Yes.
and then you received information from Mr. Burgess,
Yes.
and then you added new slides to your PowerPoint.
That's correct.
Mr. Burgess's report was May 8th.
Yes.
You provided your PowerPoint on May 25th.
Correct.
Did it take you that long for the calculations between when you got the report and May 25th to put together the new presentation?
No, it didn't.
Why did you wait until May 25th to provide the new information?
That's when I was asked to do it.
What do you mean by that? I just want to see what the date is today. Today's the 30th. When you finished your PowerPoint on May 25th, did you send it to the defense on May 25th?
Yes, I did.
But they had a copy of your PowerPoint on May 25th. Don't be shy.
No, I'm pretty sure it was the 25th.
So it's sustained.
Yeah, if it wasn't the 25th, it would have been maybe the day after, but it's dated the 25th. I'm almost positive I provided it on the 25th. Yeah. No, I think it was the 25th. No, I don't.
And the 25th.
It had the information from Mr. Burgess's supplemental report. That was the additions.
Why did you wait until the 25th to put it together?
That's when I was asked to do it. My clients, Mr. Jackson, we had a phone call on the 25th and discussed Mr. Burgess's supplemental report. During that phone call, he asked me to update the presentation, and I did so and then provided it. That's when he requested it. I think it was a Sunday, actually.
When you first got involved in this case, it was last fall,
Correct.
and at that time, you received some information that Mr. Burgess wanted to look at the text stream data or the different modules on what you later learned was the defendant's Lexus, correct?
Correct.
There was a proposal from Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess wanted to go back to the car and look at the modules to try to download more information from them, correct?
Correct.
And you then got involved to look at what his request was. So
Yes.
when you did that, were you given any materials about what had happened before you and Mr. Burgess both got involved?
I don't recall specifically, and I don't think so. I think I was just provided the notice of testing that was to be done.
Well, you ended up drafting an affidavit.
I did.
And in drafting an affidavit, you pointed out some oversights of Mr. Burgess, didn't you?
I did.
Determining those oversights required some study of actually the data.
It would.
So, can we presume that before you wrote the affidavit pointing out the oversights, you had looked at other materials?
If I recall correctly, the notice of additional testing from Mr. Burgess contained attached to it a whole report by him documenting why he thought there was an inadequate initial acquisition, why he thought the sizes were wrong. So I don't remember referencing anything beyond all the information that was contained in that. Now, whether that was combined by somebody else or not, I don't know. That's how it was provided. If I'm remembering right again, I think Ms. Gaffney's report was also attached to that same singular file.
You learned that the defense expert, Ms. Gaffney, had downloaded data from the chips, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Burgess was asserting that there was information missing and believed that there was missing information from the chips.
Correct.
In that form, it's sustained.
It's straight.
It's stricken.
My apologies. The conclusion Mr. Burgess had is that he believed there was missing information from the chips.
He did. He miscalculated the size of the chips. No, I looked at the data sheets for the chips and then immediately realized what the error was. The data sheets specify a size in megabits or gigabits, and Mr. Burgess had written his report in the context of megabytes and gigabytes.
And then you asserted, or you took the position in your affidavit, that there should be no further chip off, no further study of those chips, other than to ensure the amount of memory was.
It's not how I recall specifically what I said.
Well, let me read it because I don't want to try to malign your words.
Please.
Mr. Burgess proposed protocol labeled reattempt chip-off acquisition is unnecessary because the file size of the acquisition performed by Ms. Gaffney already matches the expected memory storage capacity of the components.
That sounds accurate.
If you want to see this, I don't want to read from the document.
That's fine. I trust your reading.
However, an acquisition may be conducted for the sole purposes of ensuring the contents of the memory chips have not been altered since the last testing by recording the checksum.
Yes.
Did it cross your mind at that point that there was important data in those modules that was not seen or recovered or obtained by Ms. Gaffney?
No.
Did you want to know when Mr. Burgess was looking for more data, more information, what he thought was missing?
He stated, I think in his report or affidavit, I'm not sure what it was, but he stated what he thought was missing was there was a physical size difference. So he thought there was not corrupt data, but just missing chunks of data.
Log on information, you've heard of that. Ignition on and ignition off information.
Yes.
And that's important information when you're reconstructing an accident, isn't it?
It could be.
Well, you read information in this case. Pretty important in this case, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
And so you would not want to engage in that process without this pretty important information, would you?
Which process?
Of an accident reconstruction?
Sorry, so can you restate it, the whole question?
I'll ask it again.
Yeah.
You said you have some experiences with accident reconstructions.
Yes.
Don't you want all the data available? More data, the better?
Generally, yes.
You wouldn't want to ignore data on purpose, would you? The data analyst, the more data, the more you get to look at.
Yes.
And so the power log on information that actually has date and time is critical.
In some accident reconstructions, in some, there's no debate about when a vehicle was on or off, but if there is, then yes.
Not just on and off. The power log on and off gives you the date and time that you can match with the text.
Yes, it does.
You know,
It can, this vehicle didn't. It can, but this vehicle did not.
this had a running time instead. Like
That's
a stopwatch.
Correct.
So this data that was not found during the initial process, that was critical data.
I don't think prior to the process anyone knew that this particular Lexus infotainment system stored those key on and key off times.
Right. The only person that found this out was Shannon Burgess.
He found it in the process, but I don't think anybody knew in advance of this case. There was nothing out there about it. So to my knowledge, this is the first time that this specific data has ever been released into the wild.
But it was on the board there. If someone knew what to look for or got creative, they could maybe find it.
Yes, more so to your if got creative, because I don't think anyone would have been able to have the foreknowledge that there would have definitely been that.
Shannon Burgess did.
Strike it.
And when Shannon Burgess went to obtain that data that everybody else overlooked or didn't know about, you went with him.
Yes.
So you had a process where he was going to now control the data and take the information that was left behind and remove it from the infotainment board, correct?
He actually never specified anything about the SD card in that initial notice. So it was a departure from his protocol, and it was a little surprising to me when I got there that the protocol was written with a specific focus on a number of other chips. And it became very apparent to me very quickly that the focus was not on those chips, and the focus was on this SD card that had previously been unmentioned. There was nothing in there about that prior to that.
Did it offend you, or were you impressed that he had found that?
I was a little confused because I went into it with an expectation. Generally, if we write a protocol, we adhere to the protocol. If we're going to deviate, we have a discussion about deviations. So I was just surprised. It's not customary to sort of shift out of nowhere. But other than that, I did not know what to think of it because I'd never heard of that.
Did you give any input? Did you have any knowledge about the SD card and how it worked?
No.
So when you watched Mr. Burgess remove the SD card, did you appreciate he'd have to engage in what you call reverse engineering?
He did not elaborate to me exactly what his whole process was at first. It sort of came out as time progressed through the first day in his office in Texas. And then I learned more as we moved to the second testing in Massachusetts. But he didn't explain it to me in one go.
Did you, at that point, understand or appreciate the relevance of the SD card relative to the infotainment system and what it could do as far as the amount of information that could then be available?
He never spoke throughout the 3 days at all about what kind of data he expected from the card or would be on the card or could be. He made no mention of the data.
On you, the significance or importance of this SD card that was sitting in plain sight? Objection.
Sustained, you can ask it to.
Did it ever dawn on you, as Mr. Burgess was recovering this information left behind, that there was something important or significant about it?
At the time, I thought it was a possibility. If you reference the initial work, a number of different memory components were identified in this infotainment. There isn't a singular memory chip. So if we're looking for data, it could be in any of them. So we found a new source of data storage, and there could be something there. There could be nothing there. It was unknown to me.
But it turned out there was.
There was.
Now, when you were watching Mr. Burgess work as an expert, if you felt like there was something inappropriate or he had some great oversight, you could write a report about that, couldn't you?
I could.
Did you ever write any report in this case?
No.
So you never wrote a report for your preparation of coming in and your data in the PowerPoint presentation, right?
Correct.
You never wrote a report regarding any of your observations of Mr. Burgess.
Correct.
You said that he didn't say anything. He spoke to you quite a bit during the process, didn't he?
He did.
He showed you what he was doing.
He did.
He explained to you what he was doing.
He explained the process. I think you had asked me earlier about whether he explained the data, and he didn't.
He demonstrated great proficiency, wouldn't you say?
He ended up with a successful acquisition of the card at the end of the process.
When you are considering all your equations, did you consider the timing information taken from the SD card that Mr. Burgess found regarding power on and power off of that car?
Yes, to the extent that he considered it in his own report. Again, I'm referencing his report.
But how about you? You're coming in here giving an opinion saying what's better or best practice or right. How about you? Did you consider, you personally, the one who's giving the opinions, did you consider the significance of the power on, power off data as it relates to all these times?
Yes.
Yes? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I considered it. If that's the question is, did I consider it? I considered it.
Did you do any study yourself?
No.
Now, we agree, or you agree, that there are variances between different devices.
Yes.
So a Lexus clock that comes from the infotainment system is very common that it would be different than a different device like an iPhone.
Specifically this Lexus, I don't know if we can make the statement that it's common or not, because again, this is the only time that I know of that this specific data has been analyzed. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Did you say on direct examination that variances between devices are common?
Variance between devices are common.
In a variance of 45 seconds, that wouldn't be remarkable on
No.
different devices. It's common in the industry.
Correct.
And in your business, that's an accepted amount.
I'm not sure what you mean by accepted. The amounts are what they are, and we have to correct for them. I've done analyses of clocks that are anywhere from completely correct, 1 second off. I've done analyses of clocks that are 25 years apart. So it's a wide range of possibilities.
I understand your point.
Yeah.
If you see, as an analyst, a 45-second variance or 30-second variance, that wouldn't shock you, would it?
No amount of variance would shock me, is the answer.
I want to ask you questions and go through your PowerPoint. And I want to ask you your specific opinions and how you arrived at certain claims that you've made.
Sure.
Okay? If we could put up Mr. Disogra's new PowerPoint, 52525. You've made a modification to your PowerPoint.
Yes.
You've made an amendment to your PowerPoint.
Yes.
So there was something that happened, you received new information or new data, and you updated or changed your PowerPoint.
I did.
And that's an appropriate thing to do when you receive new information, isn't it?
Yes.
If you have new data, you don't want to leave it behind. You want to make the best presentation with the best data you can.
I'd want my presentation of the data to be as accurate as possible, so I included all the data.
And you would expect that from any expert, wouldn't you? If they received new information or analyzed new data and it was important, it would be an appropriate best practice to update the PowerPoint or information they're providing, wouldn't it?
I'm going to allow that.
I don't know if I would tell other experts what their best practices are. I would say, generally as experts, we do work that our clients ask us to do. So if we're asked to do it, we do it. If our clients say, hey, don't do that, then we don't do it.
Well, you like the phrase best practice on direct, so I'm just wondering if I can borrow that phrase.
Sustain.
Okay. We can turn to page 2. Now, this is taken from Dr. Welcher's report.
Yes.
And again, you did no testing whatsoever. You just read
I did
reports. Did you read all of Dr. Welcher's data, the gigabytes and gigabytes of data? Did you go through it all?
Not every slide, no.
Not just the PowerPoint. I mean the actual massive amount of data in his study. Did you go through the data?
Oh, no, I didn't look at any of the data.
Did you ever speak to Dr. Welcher?
No.
And so when you are making assumptions on what he thought or how he analyzed, you're just guessing.
I am looking at what Dr. Welcher put in his trial presentation, and my assumption that's baked in there is that he's going to stand behind the things he says in a presentation. So I'm taking them at face value, but as being correct.
It's not a matter
I'm
of
not guessing.
It's not a matter if he's going to stand behind it. You don't know why he put something in here. You just see it on the paper. You don't know what his thought process was, did you?
To an extent, yes, because I understand how the exemplar testing by Aperture laid the foundation to align the key-on events in the infotainment to the Lexus VCH events.
When Dr. Welcher made his PowerPoint, do you know whether or not he was relying on 154 on Mr. O'Keefe's phone, stamp 154, as the end of the event as opposed to the beginning of the three-point turn, 1162-1?
Based on the math he uses, that's the implication. He puts a number on the screen that the only way you could reach that number is by making that assumption. So when I looked at the math, yes, that assumption seems baked into the math he did.
So this seems like it's baked in that he was assuming 154 on John O'Keefe's phone was the end of the three-point turn.
Not on this slide, on a later slide, but yes.
Okay. And you said that variances, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, they're very common when you're comparing two different devices, right?
Yes.
Okay. You point out 2 times for the jury, the Lexus event 1162-2 ends 12:31:43, right?
Yes.
And that's based on the clock in the infotainment system.
That time is based on 2 things, the clock in the infotainment unit and the cumulative key-on timer in the text stream data. So it's a combination of two values.
Which is the running clock.
Correct.
Right. And that is compared or contrasted or coordinated with the log on off time that was found on the SD card. Yes?
Yes.
And without that SD card, we wouldn't have that time now, would we?
Correct.
Okay. 123209 isn't something you analyzed, but you just read in the report that that is information from Ian Whiffen suggesting or taking the position that was the last user interaction John O'Keefe had with his cell phone, 123209.
That's how I understand it. There was a phone lock at 123209. I did not look into the underlying reports from where that came.
And you know those are two different devices, two different clocks that will have a variance.
Yes.
You mentioned trigger event, and you said that your preference is to, when you're doing times, to point it from the actual trigger event, and there was a little slap for emphasis to target you on that, right? The trigger event. That's not a standard practice or a protocol that is supported by any type of literature, is it?
It's the methodology I teach, especially in the class I teach on the analysis of heavy vehicle data. We have the exact same problem with heavy vehicles. They all have clocks on them. And so, in fact, I do a lot of clock adjustment on heavy vehicles relative to other sources. And the way I teach it, I'm not the only instructor, collectively, the way we all teach it is we generally start the analysis at the trigger, which is not to suggest you have to do that. It's not wrong to do it a different way, but that would be let's call it the default methodology.
The default methodology, do you have any professional literature that says that is the best time to start the analysis?
Not literature. I mean, that's sort of my opinion, because that introduces the least amount of variables. Once you start trying to align events off of subsequent times, you just introduce more addition and subtraction or math you have to do. So it's easiest to do T0 and align everything from there. That could be a scenario where then you wouldn't use it. Right. Like I said, it's not the only way, but it's the default way.
I don't disrespect your method, but there are other ways to do it that are just as legitimate as the trigger time.
Absolutely. And that's why I didn't change the convention here. I used their convention,
so you're
apertures.
Not just pronounce that's exactly the point he was considering, are you?
No.
And so the word cherry picking, you're not saying he was cherry picking, are you?
I don't remember the context in which I used the word cherry picking, but I don't think it was with respect to a trigger alignment.
So there's no legitimate professional basis of suggesting your way is better or worse than going from the front or the end of the event?
No.
I'm offering criticism on it.
Not criticism. I pointed out that it's not typical, and I pointed out not even to say specifically that it's not typical, because even that, to your point, might sound critical. I just want to be clear that I adopted their convention. It's not the way I would have done it, but I kept that convention consistent in my analysis. So I wasn't changing in the middle, trying to obfuscate what I'm saying.
I appreciate that. So if someone's looking end to end, you're not going to add 5 seconds. It's if someone went from middle to end.
Could you give me that?
Yeah, you were suggesting those questions about, well, since you're looking at the end instead of the middle, then you got to add another 5 seconds on. That's not really an accurate analysis if you...
I'm going to allow it if you can answer it in that form.
It's going to depend on if you're doing an alignment with something that is a range of values, then you have to be consistent on where you're doing it. If you're doing discrete points, then that's just a single point in time. There's no beginning or end. It's just a single second. So the best answer I can kind of give is it depends on what you're doing.
Well, in this case, you're basing it off the end of different devices.
You would not add 5 seconds for the heck of it.
You see 123209 minus 123143, the middle line, equals 26 seconds. Isn't that in Dr. Welcher's slides before, let me phrase it more cleanly, before Shannon Burgess analyzed the data more closely on May 8th, in his May 8th report? Isn't this the exact difference in time that Dr. Welcher cites in his PowerPoint, 26 seconds?
I'll sustain it in there.
Did you see, when you reviewed reports, that Dr. Welcher uses this exact number plus 26 seconds in his report?
I got the number from the PowerPoint.
I'm sorry,
not the
PowerPoint.
report, but that is all of the numbers here on this slide are from Dr. Welcher's PowerPoint. And on the previous slide, I show that. So these are all just copied straight from that.
And you've labeled this John's interaction window.
I did.
Interaction window, Do you think it might be confusing when you use interaction window to make it seem like the event was limited to 10 seconds?
No, and that's not the implication there at all.
That's not what you're trying to say.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
Fair enough, fair enough.
If I can clarify what I mean by interaction window is that there's
Please do.
a range of times that we end up with when we start running these adjustments. So we never land on a singular point of alignment. We end up, like I showed at the end, with 30 points. That's the window that I'm talking about. That's the window that I mean.
So if we could put up page 33 from Dr. Welcher's PowerPoint, just to illustrate the point you're trying to help us with. So this represents, you've seen this, right?
It looks familiar, like it's from one of his slides. And if I've seen it, I did not spend a lot of time digging into it.
Does this look like the 10 seconds of data that will be captured from a triggering event in a text stream data? Objection.
I want to see you at sidebar.
Sidebar.
We released you for the luncheon break. I took so long here to make sure that we could give you a nice full hour luncheon break. So we'll see you back here in an hour.
Ms. Gilman, if we could turn to page 6 of Mr. Disogra's amended PowerPoint presentation. Sir, I want to ask you about your opinions, and inevitably some of the slides that you've presented to this jury regarding adjusting the clock in a time period of 3 seconds. You have given an opinion that there's a difference that you see in the reports between when the defendant's Lexus is powered on and the infotainment system begins, correct?
Yes.
There's a 3-second difference on the exemplar vehicle between when the power is turned on and then the screen lights up, the ignition of the infotainment system.
The 3 seconds I'm referring to is the timestamp in the data from the SD card. So I'm referring to the timestamp in the SD card. It seems that that's coupled to the screen, but I just want to make it clear I'm referencing the data from the SD card.
The data from the SD card correlates directly to the infotainment system itself.
The date does, yes.
Because the SD card is, with the other chips, part of the board that makes up the infotainment system.
Yes.
That infotainment system powers the screen that goes on after a user presses the button to start the vehicle.
Yes.
So the time that the infotainment system is registering is when the infotainment system goes on, not the power on event.
Correct.
So that 3 seconds that was tested with the exemplar vehicle between pressing the button to turn the car on and the time the infotainment system turns on, the infotainment system clock does not accommodate that 3 seconds.
Correct.
So when we're talking about time on infotainment system, we're talking about after the 3 seconds when the screen comes on.
Yes.
Okay. Now you've made some slides and you've made some assumptions suggesting that that 3 seconds should be added to your analysis. And I want to ask you about your analysis regarding the 3 seconds. If we could turn to page 7, please. If you could zoom in on the left side. Sir, you told us that you didn't do any testing or data vetting yourself. You simply relied on reading and reviewing Mr. Burgess's report and Mr. Welcher's report.
Correct.
And really, the information you're reviewing is Mr. Burgess's report. There's only a few references in Mr. Welcher's report where he cites Mr. Burgess's findings, correct?
Most of it is from Mr. Burgess's reports.
There's really nothing in any of Dr. Welcher's reports that you are considering that is not in Mr. Burgess's report.
The .154 alignment methodology, I think exclusively is in Dr. Welcher's and is not present in Mr. Burgess's.
Did you read both of Mr. Burgess's reports?
Yes.
You're not aware that Mr. Burgess talks about that timestamp in his reports?
He mentions it in the second report to say that he doesn't think Dr. Welcher should have aligned it on that.
That is exactly not what he said. Where in the report, where in his report does he say that Dr. Welcher should not have relied on 154? Where does it say that in his report? I have it here. If you can give me the page, we will take a look at it.
I don't know the page, and I'm paraphrasing. by no means am I conveying that as I'm directly quoting it, but I remember that as something I read in there.
Well, I was careful in your affidavit not to paraphrase you, right?
Sustained.
So when you just made that assumption or that suggestion characterizing Dr. Welcher's state of mind or thought process, is there anywhere in the report you can cite or show me where Dr. Welcher said that?
No.
Okay. When you read Mr. Burgess's report and you learned that he and others obtained an exemplar vehicle and did this testing, you have no other independent information to suggest that the power on, power off event and 3-second delay is inaccurate, do you?
I just want to make sure I heard you. Did you say accurate or inaccurate?
Inaccurate. I'm sorry, the fan's on. I'm trying to
I
show.
know that's the only reason I couldn't hear that. So can you state it one more time?
I'll rephrase it. When you reviewed Mr. Burgess's report and reviewed the information about his exemplar testing regarding the 3-second difference between turning on the car and the infotainment system going on, you have no other information that you looked at or studied that changes that analysis, do you?
No.
Now, when you are suggesting, could we shrink that and zoom on the right side, please? When you are suggesting that 3 seconds should be added to the time because of that 3-second gap, do you think maybe you made a mistake in considering it that way?
No.
Okay. The time that you're adding 3 seconds to is the infotainment time, the infotainment clock, correct?
Yes.
The infotainment clock begins when the infotainment system goes on. We just spoke about that, correct?
Right?
Which is 3 seconds after the power on event.
Correct.
So you're essentially double dipping. You're adding 3 seconds that has already been separated because it isn't reflected on the infotainment system. Isn't that true?
That's incorrect.
You believe that that 3 seconds between the power on and the infotainment system going on should be accommodated extra on top of it.
It's not that it's extra. It's because when we're talking about times here, we're pulling a time from the infotainment and we're marrying that with a key on timer from the vehicle control history. Those are separate systems. So if the vehicle control history had its own time, then what you're saying would be correct. We wouldn't account for any delays because then it's already baked into those numbers. But this is a very unique analysis. This is not something I've ever even seen, this type of analysis here where we're comparing a timestamp from an infotainment SD card to a VCH total time. And so the only way to reconcile those two is we have to align them. And the 3 seconds is the alignment between those because the VCH key on timer is going to start as soon as the vehicle is turned on. And that's the 3 seconds.
You've never seen this before.
I've never seen the approach taken here in this analysis by Aperture. That's what I meant by this. I'll clarify. I have not seen a timestamp from a key on event in a Lexus infotainment used in addition to the key on timer from that same Lexus.
You know Mr. Burgess actually looked at the data, not just the timestamp. He looked at the data. You understand that, don't you?
Sure.
You did not, did you?
Which data?
The data for the timestamp on the text stream data.
There is no timestamp on the text stream data, is my point. It's a derived value from the key on time, and then added to that is the elapsed time from the text stream. So they're separate.
Did you look at the data to make that determination that you're claiming right now? Did you actually look at the data?
Yes. Yeah.
You looked at the raw data?
I looked at, yes, the raw text stream data.
The raw text stream data from infotainment, did you look at it?
I just don't want to mince it. The text stream data is an independent system from the infotainment, and you said from, so they're not.
Did you look at the infotainment raw data?
I did.
Okay. And did you find a timestamp on the infotainment raw data?
Yes.
Now, when you added 3 seconds, you were trying to, in addition to the infotainment data, you were adding on the 3-second delay that now you're saying might not even be accurate. Is that fair to say?
I don't think I've ever said it's not accurate. I said that in the exemplar testing, they documented this behavior of a 3-second delay, and that needs to be accounted for if you're going to correct the timestamps. However, the caveat I put on that was only with one exemplar vehicle. So it could be that this behavior, the 3 seconds, is unique to the exemplar and would not apply to other similar vehicles. And so that's why I did either nothing or the 3, because there's nothing to support something in between.
So you disagree that the clock stamp on the infotainment module begins the run. You believe that there's potentially 3 seconds before when the ignition goes on that should be added to that time.
I know from testing other Toyota systems that the key on timer happens almost at the identical time that the vehicle is turned on. That timer starts running basically immediately.
But on this case, you don't know anything firsthand because you didn't do the testing yourself.
I don't know if it would specifically apply to this Lexus. I know that from other Toyota testing, but not this specific Lexus.
I'm sorry, finish.
No, I'm clarifying. I do know that from other Toyota and VCH systems, that key on timer is basically simultaneous with the key on. I have not tested it on this, and I don't believe that it was tested by Aperture when they had it either. They didn't document the accuracy of the run timer in their exemplar, so we don't know.
Well, you don't know that they didn't document that.
To be fair, if they did, it was not in their reports.
Right. So in this case, you said cars are different, and that's why you're hesitant to accept the fact that there's a 3-second delay. It's a yes or no question.
I'm saying we don't know. Had Aperture done testing with a separate vehicle, then we could establish, is the 3 seconds the same or is it unique? We don't know. The answer is we don't know.
And so when you are determining that 3-second variance, you don't have any assurance in your own mind whether or not this car, Miss Reed's Lexus, has a 3-second variance. That's what you're trying to say.
That's correct, and that's why I run my calculations with and without it.
And the way you would determine that is to actually do testing or look at the data.
More testing, I think, is the only way that would be able to be determined.
Now, let's turn to slide 9. As part of your charts, could you enlarge the left, please? As part of your charts, you took this chalk from Attorney Burgess's report, and you made some assumptions about this, didn't you?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I applied the numbers in his third column to the times, so that's the extent of the analysis.
When you looked at the first 5 columns, 1:14, 13 a.m., 4:38, 16 a.m., 4:42:06 a.m., 4:45, 12 a.m., and 5:04, 28 a.m. You said on direct examination, that was matching infotainment to iPhone.
That's what it says on the chart, so
Okay.
that's probably what I said. I don't remember specifically, but that's what the chart says.
Is that your opinion, that those first 5 columns are matching infotainment to iPhone?
The chart says infotainment call timestamp in column 1. It says O'Keefe iPhone call timestamps in column 2, and then it says offset. So I'm taking that at face value.
You're basing your later charts on the predicate that these numbers, the first 5 columns, are infotainment compared to John O'Keefe's iPhone, aren't you?
Based on the chart, yes.
You didn't do any study on your own to determine the genesis of that information, did you?
I'm aware of the fact that these calls, the 5 you mentioned, were placed when the vehicle was in a keyed off state. I'm aware of that.
What I asked you specifically is, on those 5 columns, did you do any research or study to determine whether or not it was infotainment matched to John O'Keefe's iPhone or some other phone matched to John O'Keefe's iPhone? Did you do any independent studies about that?
No.
Because in your ultimate conclusions and all the charts you've given to the jury and shown the jury, it relies on the conclusion that the first 5 columns are a comparison between infotainment clock.
That's exactly how the chart presents it, and that's how I present it.
Did you know that at 1:14:13 a.m. the defendant's Lexus was turned off?
Yes.
Did you know at 4:38:16 a.m. that the defendant's Lexus was turned off?
Yes.
And did you know for 4:42:06, 4:45:12, 5:04:28, did you know that her Lexus was turned off?
Yes.
Do you know that when you make phone calls, oh, by the way, Do you know on those different times, the first 5 times, where that information is generated from?
Which column?
Left column, 11413, all the way down to 50428. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. Do you know where that information came from?
It came from the SD card from the infotainment.
Yeah. Do you know where the genesis, the beginning, the source of that information? That matters, right? The source?
It would. The assumption, the assumption is if the vehicle has a timestamp and the phone wasn't connected, it would have been synchronized after the fact. But that wasn't tested. And Aperture didn't do any of that testing in their work to look at the behavior of a timestamp in the infotainment when a phone is synchronized after the fact.
Do you know the genesis, the source of those 4 numbers?
Definitively no.
Your entire premise for your slides and values and ranges depends on knowing the genesis of those numbers, doesn't it?
I relied on Mr. Burgess's explanation that those times were synchronized after the fact.
Did you know that those are all phone calls from the defendant's phone to?
Yes.
You did know that.
I know that they're phone calls
From who?
sorry, can you maybe just state it more clearly? Because I'm not sure, I don't want to fumble through an answer if I don't understand the question. So,
You know where those calls came from?
a phone,
Whose?
Miss Reed's phone.
Now, I know you're not an expert on mobile devices, but did you know when it's not a contemporaneous synchronization, plug your phone in, it's going to register on the infotainment system, but come from the phone? Objection.
Sustained.
Do you know when someone plugs their phone in after they turn the car back on, how it synchronizes on the infotainment system?
I don't know if adjustments are made to those times during a synchronization or not. I think that's something that could be tested, and to my knowledge, was not tested.
If you don't know, then your conclusions and all your opinions to this jury is based on an assumption that you don't even know the predicate for. Isn't that fair to say?
My conclusions are based on all of the data that Mr. Burgess laid out. So he laid these out and went so far as to calculate the offsets himself. So there's something implied in his table by virtue of him calculating these that maybe he would decide to align them. And so, again, to provide the clarity on all the possible alignments, I included them.
But that's not what I asked. If you're making an improper assumption about the predicate, about these calls and the source of them, and you're wrong, that would change your entire analysis and conclusions and charts that we see in your later charts, wouldn't it?
Sure, if there was testing that showed that that is an invalid method on this specific Lexus and SD card, then of the 30 possibilities, some of them would end up being eliminated.
Did you know that when an iPhone is plugged into a car, it downloads the information from the iPhone on the infotainment system? Did you know that?
I don't know how the clocks are synchronized when you plug an iPhone into a car.
Well, if you don't know, how can you make conclusions based on a target if you don't even know what it is?
The conclusions are based on the data in Mr. Burgess's report.
I know you're not an expert on mobile devices.
So I'm going to strike that. Go ahead and ask your
My
question.
apologies. If you have 2 different devices, a Lexus clock, infotainment, and an iPhone, you would agree that it's not unexpected to be variances, correct?
Correct.
When you're comparing 2 iPhones, do you have an opinion? Do you agree that you would expect the variance to be very small, iPhone to iPhone?
I don't know.
Have you ever studied that before?
2 iPhones?
Yes.
No.
So as you sit there today, you don't have any expertise, any education, any knowledge about how closely 2 iPhones would sync with each other?
No.
Do you see in the first 5 columns the numbers are small, 22121?
Yes.
Would you agree iPhone to iPhone using the same source of time is generally going to be within 1 or 2 seconds of each other? Objection.
Sustained.
Have any opinion about whether iPhones to iPhones will generally be within 1 to 2 seconds of each other? Objection.
You can ask if there's an opinion. Do you have an opinion on that?
No.
Next question.
If the first 5 calls are iPhone to iPhone, rather than infotainment to iPhone, you agree all of your assumptions and conclusions are inaccurate.
They're not iPhone to iPhone in the sense that column 1 came from the infotainment. The values were read from the SD card. So there's an assumption baked into it. What you're saying that when a phone is synchronized, the infotainment assumes the times of the phone, but we don't know whether the infotainment would adjust those times to its own clock or not.
Yeah.
We don't know. It wasn't tested. I don't know is the answer.
Don't know.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I do not.
Okay. Don't say we don't know. You don't know. Then your assumption on the first off, 122-121. If they're iPhone to iPhone, and you're wrong about the fact it's infotainment to iPhone, your assumptions and conclusions are inaccurate, aren't they?
I'll allow this.
If the title of the first column had iPhone in it as well, then I would not have used it in my analysis.
But that's not the question. I appreciate that. My question is, those first 5 calls were iPhone time to iPhone time, and you mistakenly analyze them as infotainment time to iPhone time, then the rest of your assumptions and charts would be inaccurate, wouldn't they? Objection.
Sustain.
At 521:36, do you know whether or not the defendant's Lexus was on?
I don't recall if that one was an on or an off point. I don't want to guess. I don't recall.
And so if you don't know if that was on or off, were you able to do an analysis whether this was phone to phone or infotainment to phone?
No.
5:30:31, do you know if the defendant's car was on?
That one I know the vehicle was on.
That's one timestamp on the infotainment system, 5:30:31, correct?
Correct.
And then in the O'Keefe iPhone call timestamps, there are 2 different numbers, 5:30:15, 5:30:52. Yes?
Yes.
Right. And do you appreciate that that is 2 separate calls, or do you think it's something different?
I'm going to paraphrase, again, Mr. Birch's report as I recall it, in that he stated during the testing they did with the exemplar, calls placed in close succession would not necessarily both be logged in the infotainment. So as I understand this chart, what he's trying to say here is there were 2 calls placed, there were 2 call logs in Mr. O'Keefe's phone, but only 1 timestamp in the infotainment, and he couldn't determine which it corresponded to because of that observed behavior from testing.
I'm asking if you know.
I don't.
Did you ever look at phone records for the defendant or for Mr. O'Keefe to make a determination whether these are 2 separate calls or not? Did you ever do that?
No.
If these are 2 separate calls, can you explain to us why there is 1 timestamp?
Again, as I stated, that was behavior that was observed. The exact behavior was observed during the exemplar testing by Aperture. I don't know why that happens. Why does the infotainment not log every call? I don't. But I know that it was documented that that is a feature of this system.
This information was not taken.
This table, no.
This information was taken from the infotainment system of the defendant's car. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And the phone calls were taken from Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And so, you know why there would be 2 phone calls and only 1 timestamp?
Beyond the testing, the exemplar testing that showed an exemplar vehicle did that, no, I don't know why it happens.
Do you know that the infotainment system doesn't always capture all of the phone calls and the phone data in the download? Did you know that?
Yes.
Well, if you know that, can you conclude that even though there's 2 calls and only 1 timestamp, that's because how the infotainment system works?
I think that's the most logical assumption, that that's how it works.
So when you look at 5:30:15, bottom middle, and 5:30:52, it is impossible to tell which one relates to the 5:30:31 infotainment on the left. Compare. It's impossible, right?
Yes.
So there's 2 possibilities.
Yes.
One is that you have a difference, a disparity of 16 seconds.
Yes.
And the other one, going the opposite way, is a disparity of 21 seconds.
Correct.
And so when you add those disparities, you have 27 seconds disparity. Is there a 27-second disparity when you compare the 2?
I'm not sure I understand the math.
5:30:31 is 16 seconds different than 5:30:15 on Mr. O'Keefe's phone. Yes?
Yes.
5:30:31 is 21 seconds different. Yes?
Yes. Correct.
I'm going to allow that.
No. You're saying if maybe, so I can be clear what you're asking, if we have a negative 16 and we have a positive 21,
Correct.
how many seconds are in between there?
Exactly.
37?
And so you can see, did you know that the defense car was turned on at 5:07 a.m.?
I don't have any of those key-ons committed to memory.
So you can see between 5:21 and 5:30, the offset is different between them, which shows that variances change. They move.
That seems reasonable, yes.
But when I said it seems reasonable, do you have the experience and the knowledge to agree with me that variances move?
Yes, they do.
Okay. If those first 5 calls were iPhone to iPhone rather than infotainment to iPhone, would you agree they should not have been considered in your analysis?
Yes, with the caveat that because this is a novel analysis with this SD card and this infotainment, that it was demonstrated that that's the behavior. My opinions on things like that are based on testing and research and literature. And so when we have a brand new system with new data, we want to see some testing to prove it works the way we think it works. But under the assumption, then yes.
You would agree?
Yes.
If we turn to 10, please. Given, could you zoom in a little, please, on the left? Given that these data points come at 5 in the morning, or 1, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, and 5:30, did you consider whether they would be less reliable than comparing to the triggering event, the 3-point turn at 12:23 the night before? Did you consider that?
Yes.
When you said you reviewed in your critiquing reports, did you read Mr. Burgess's report on May 8, 2025?
Yes.
Did you read in his report where he explains that this is a less reliable method to, it's a less reliable method because of the time distance between the actual event we're interested in, 1162 at 12:31, 43 to 48, than the 3-point turn?
Yes.
Okay. When he explains that the method of using 5:21 and 5:30 on January 29, 2022, he explains about how the information is stored in the infotainment system when it's powered back on, doesn't he?
I'm not sure.
Well, do you remember when you were reviewing his report that he explains the available call log correlation is restricted to a time frame between 5:21 and 5:30 a.m. on January 29, 2022, when the vehicle was powered on. All other calls stored in the infotainment module occurred while the vehicle was powered off, indicating those entries were synced from Miss Reed's iPhone upon reconnecting to the system on the morning of January 29th. You considered that when you decided or formulated your critique, didn't you?
Yes.
This further indicated that the associated timestamps for those calls originated from Miss Reed's iPhone. Did you read that?
Yes.
Relative to those first 5 columns, correct?
Yes.
This behavior was previously documented in the initial report, which is the January 30th report. Yes?
Yes.
You shrugged. I mean, I don't want you just to agree with me. Do you remember it was in the January 30th report?
I don't remember how he phrased it specifically, but I think there was somewhere around there where he noted that some calls were placed while the vehicle was off. I think that's basically what it said in the first one. I don't remember specifically.
Okay. Do you agree generally, or can I give you the report? You can look and remind yourself. I want to get your best memory on this.
Sure.
What would you like me to do?
If you'd like me to look at it, I'll look at it.
Sure.
Do
Do
you
you have a
have
copy?
the reports with you, sir?
No.
Okay. Do you have an extra copy for him, Mr. Brennan?
Mine is marked. Just want to show the mark. Let me see if I can get a clean copy. I don't have a clean copy. I don't want to show you something that has my writing on it. Not that I care that you read it, but it's protocol. Okay. In discussing why this is not an effective way of matching the time, did you consider in his May 8, 2025 report, when he's talking about this method, when he says, as a result, this method yields a single reference point for potential alignment?
Yes.
And when
Call
he's
logs
talking-
are discrete points.
I'm sorry?
The call logs are discrete points for alignment. Is that? I don't know. It sounds like it, but I don't know.
From the 5:21 a.m. to the 5:30 a.m. window, a clock speed of approximately -8 and -16 plus 21 seconds were observed between the Lexus clock and Mr. O'Keefe's iPhone clock. Did you consider that?
Yes.
This offset is measured approximately 5 hours after the time of the collision and cannot be assumed to apply to other time frames stated in the initial report. Objection.
I'm going to allow it unless, do you have, I'll see Counselor Sidebar.
Burgess' report, the same report that you're critiquing. Sir, going back to my question, so you read Mr. Burgess' report, the same report that you're critiquing, and you were aware of this information, weren't you?
Yes.
And so you were aware that Mr. Burgess in his May 8th report was identifying that the section in green was the only contemporaneous information for analysis. Did you know that?
Is that how he states it specifically?
I can read it again. I just read it to you.
If you don't mind.
Okay.
So let's give him a copy.
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
Let's give him a copy. Does he have the clean copy?
You turn to page 3. What I read to you was where it says clock sync method 1. Do you see that?
Yes.
And this is, if you look at the second paragraph, I read that to you word for word. Do you see that?
Yes.
The 5:21 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. are the only 2 data points when that car was on January 29, 2022. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And if you look at the last paragraph, do you agree or disagree? As a result, this method yields a single reference point for potential alignment. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay. Because you still are under the mistaken belief that
Sustained.
you still have the opinion that the first 5 rows are an infotainment to iPhone analysis.
It's presented as that way in his initial report, which is what my initial analysis was based on. And in the supplemental report, there's no further testing to say one way or the other. He just has a new opinion. So I stand by the initial analysis that I had, that those points should be included with all of the other points.
But that's not my question. My question is, you are taking the position those first 5 calls are an infotainment to iPhone analysis.
They could be, and so I include them. I'm not saying they definitively are or not, which is why I never say there is one way to do it. That's why I say there's a whole host of ways to do it.
So you're now saying that you're not assuming that's an infotainment to iPhone analysis. Are you now saying that?
It's stated that way, and I think it could be that way, but it might be iPhone to iPhone too, if those times are just copied over.
And if it was iPhone to iPhone, your analysis would be wrong.
Certain lines would go away. So if you want to call the whole analysis wrong because of that, it might be your characterization.
Okay.
It would change the total number of possibilities.
So if we put up chart 12, page 12, please. If you were wrong about the infotainment to iPhone analysis and those first 5 should not be considered, which part of your chart would now be wrong?
What do we have? 12 lines on the chart?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, we have 12 lines on the chart. If we decided to eliminate the lines that are based on the calls when the vehicle was off, we would be left with 4 lines on the chart.
And if we turn to 14, please, and if you could enlarge, well, I don't think you can enlarge it. If your analysis about infotainment to iPhone was wrong, you would agree those first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns should not be there, should they?
No, the positive 16 stays, the negative 21 stays, 1, 2, 8, and 20 would go away. So we'd lose 4 lines from this chart.
And the negative 16 line, that comes from information at 5:30 a.m. the next morning.
Correct.
And you would agree that that distance is not as accurate as cueing it from the 3-point turn event 1162-1.
The 3-point turn is closer in time than the call at 5:32.
And thus more reliable, wouldn't you say?
Generally.
And the negative 21, that was from 5:30 and some seconds the next morning. Same idea. Not as reliable as the 3-point turn information.
There's greater uncertainty the farther in time we get.
So when we turn to the 3-point turn information, you mentioned in Dr. Welcher's report that it was noted that the timestamp 154 was the end of the 3-point turn event, correct?
That's how he states it.
And then more information was provided when Mr. Burgess then broke down that 154 timestamp, correct?
Correct.
And when he broke down the 154 timestamp, he actually wrote a report about it, didn't he?
Yes?
He didn't just have it in his head. He put it on paper for all to see, yes?
Yes.
And in that report, not only does he break down the data, he also shows a visual of the actual data on a map, doesn't he?
He does.
Yes. 192A? Okay. Let's start with 192B, please. You could open that up so we could see it a little better. When you look at the data he actually broke down, do you agree that instead of at the end of the three-point turn event as timestamp 154, that actually is at the beginning of the three-point turn? Do you agree with that?
I don't know if the points are numbered on here, so I can't tell which point he's referencing as 154.
Do you see the green circle?
Yes.
Do you see the black line?
Yes.
Does that orient you to the direction the car was traveling?
That appears to be what he's trying to convey with this chart.
And then the yellow is facing a different direction, towards Fairview, correct?
It is.
And do you see the green square rectangle?
Yes.
You think that correlates to the green circle?
That seems to be what this graph implies.
Okay. And it notes that,
So ask it differently, Mr. Bowman.
does that heading note the start of the three-point turn of O'Keefe's phone is 12:23:59?
I'm going to allow it.
That's what Mr. Burgess states in the report.
And do you have any information to suggest that's not spot on accurate?
No, I didn't do an independent analysis of the three-point turn maneuver.
And then the heading of the change, end of three-point turn to O'Keefe's home, 12:24:07. You have any information to suggest that's not spot on accurate?
I did not analyze the three-point turn maneuver.
And so when you look at that and break down 154, did you determine or make an analysis that 154 that was generally accepted, because there is variances between items, when you break it down with more specificity, 154 is actually earlier than the three-point turn conclusion? Did you consider that?
I'm going to allow that, yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the question, if you don't mind.
You mentioned Dr. Welch's report said it relied on 154 as a timestamp for the end of the three-point turn.
Yes.
Based on Mr. Burgess's May's report and based on the data which you don't contest, you now agree that 154 was not the end of that three-point turn. It was at the beginning.
Based on how Mr. Burgess presents it, I didn't do an independent analysis. So I'm not on one side with Mr. Burgess or one side with Dr. Welcher. They present independent methods.
Are you suggesting in any way it's inaccurate? Are you suggesting it is in any way inaccurate? Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
I don't have any opinions as to the individual accuracy of the methods selected by either Mr. Burgess or Dr. Welcher.
Do you have any information you'd like to add or weigh in on to dispute the accuracy of those times? Objection.
Sustained.
And let's turn to the previous exhibit so we can actually see the data that's broken down. We could open that. The 154 timestamp, if you go to the left, please. Do you see that right above the green line?
Yes.
12:23:58. You see that?
Yes.
And then the green goes to the orange, and that's an 8-second difference, isn't it?
Yes.
And when you looked at this, you considered that this was a more detailed study of that timestamp by Mr. Burgess, right?
More detailed is, yes, that's correct.
And do you know why he did a more detailed analysis of this? Why it wasn't in the original PowerPoint?
No, I don't.
Well, you said that variances are generally accepted in the community, right?
Yes.
But then you wrote a report suggesting numbers and additions, and you submitted that report as part of the basis of your testimony, right?
I only submitted a PowerPoint. I have no report.
PowerPoint. After you submitted the PowerPoint, isn't it fair to say Mr. Burgess then analyzed this data to be more specific after you introduced your PowerPoint?
Yes.
So can you guess why he went through a more detailed analysis?
No.
Sustained. Strike it.
In the final exhibit, let's go back to the data. You said that Mr. Burgess had an 8-second range, 21 to 29 seconds, remember?
Yes.
And you were suggesting that somehow there was some uncertainty. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Were you guessing about his state of mind, whether he was certain or not? Do you know why he gave an 8-second range? Objection.
So ask it differently, Mr. Bowman.
Okay. You suggested the reason why there's an 8-second range is that Mr. Burgess was uncertain. Remember saying that to this jury?
Not in those exact words, but that's what uncertainty is. Uncertainty is a range. If we don't know a specific value, we put a range around it. That's uncertainty.
This data from the green, would you agree it indicates the beginning of the three-point turn, and then the orange is at the end when the car is already in motion at 11.2 miles per hour? Objection.
I'm going to allow it. Do you agree with that?
I see speed values there. I see some headings. I can't convert GPS in my head, so I don't know. I could have.
But you didn't.
I did not.
I'm going to allow that.
No.
And so by giving the range of 8 seconds, talk about looking at different values to be fair, wider range, right? Even though this analysis depends on the end of the three-point turn, wouldn't you agree it's kind of forgiving to give that 8-second range to get the benefit of the doubt by starting at the beginning of the three-point turn all the way to the end of it rather than just giving the end point?
As to that form, ask it differently, Mr.
Does the 8-second range that is provided by Mr. Burgess coincide with the data and the 8-second range between the green and the orange?
That's where he comes up with the 8-second range, correct.
And so if Aperture's position is the matching times at the end of the event, by going back to the beginning, isn't that even more forgiving than being scientifically? Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
Yeah, I would call it a conservative approach to use a range of values.
Right. The opposite of cherry picking, right?
Sure.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of forensic data certainty about whether the text stream data provides data reflecting whether a collision actually occurred?
No.
In your opinion, to a reasonable degree of forensic certainty, is the text stream data would not reflect the collision, correct?
That's not what I said. I don't have an opinion.
And you know that there can be collisions or touching between vehicle, and it's not going to appear on the text stream data. You know that, right?
It's possible.
It's possible. Did you know that the defendant's vehicle at 5:07 a.m. on January 29, 2022 bumped into a different car?
Yes.
Do you see that reflected on the text stream data?
I'm thinking back to when I reviewed the raw text stream data, and I don't remember seeing an event from that.
I can't really hear
I don't
you.
remember seeing an event from that time in the text stream data.
Well, you don't remember seeing it. It's not there, is it?
I don't think it is. I don't remember seeing it. I don't think there's one.
You're not.
I was going to finish and say I don't have all of the events committed to memory. There's
You're-
19 of them.
I'm sorry.
There's 19 events. I don't have them all committed to memory.
You're not testifying or offering an opinion that there was no collision with this car that night, are you?
No.
Because if you were implying that or suggesting that or insinuating that, that would be misleading, wouldn't it?
It's not.
Sustained.
I have no further questions.
Okay.
You were asked a number of questions a few minutes ago by Mr. Brennan concerning your expertise. I'm just going to grab a pen. Specifically, you were asked about your expertise regarding mobile data devices. Mobile devices and their data, correct?
Yes.
And were you being truthful when you indicated that you were not an expert in
Yes.
that field? Were you being truthful when you indicated that you have a certain expertise in EDR data?
Yes.
Were you being truthful when you indicated that you did review Mr. Burgess's data and Mr. Welcher's data as reflected in their reports and PowerPoints?
Yes.
Were you being truthful about your credentials?
Yes.
Have you ever lied about your credentials?
No.
You hold a bachelor's degree
Yes.
and you hold a master's degree.
I do.
You ever lied to anybody about that?
No.
Mr. Disogra, what is the only reason you amended your PowerPoint presentation from its original version to the one that you most recently amended it to?
To include the additional analysis and data points from Mr. Burgess's supplemental report, the May 8th report.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go
The
ahead.
May 8th report.
So you amended yours because he amended his.
Correct.
You were asked just a second ago about all the text stream events that you noted on Ms. Reed's SUV, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Brennan asked you about a specific text stream event at or around 5:07 in the morning, and whether you had something like that committed to memory, correct?
Yes.
You said, I don't have them all committed to memory, right?
I don't.
What did you say after that? Because there's how many?
It was 19 events prior to 1162-2, 19 other events.
How about after 1162?
There were a number after 1162-2. I don't have the exact count in my head.
How about after 1162, just on January 29th, going into January 30th?
There were other events.
How many?
I don't recall the exact number. That it sounds plausible. I recall seeing in the chart. I recall seeing a number of events after.
Would it chart?
It would. Yeah, there are a lot. I would have to really use my finger to count them all.
Okay, more than 8.
Total after 1162-2. There aren't date stamps on these because this chart is the raw text stream data, which doesn't have timestamps.
Safe to say,
Yes.
again, this goes back to a question that you were asking Mr. Brennan. I want to follow up on. In no instance were any of those related to a collision, to your knowledge, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Any of those that you reviewed at any time, the lifetime of the vehicle, related to a collision?
None of them were triggered by a collision.
Thank you. I want to ask you a hypothetical, if I could, based on questioning by Mr. Brennan surrounding the 12/32/09 lock event. Do you remember him asking about those questions, about that event?
Yes.
Your analysis was based on the time span. Let me rephrase that. Was your analysis based on Mr. Burgess's and Mr. Welcher's analyses together of a span of time between the 1162-2 text stream event or trigger event and the lock event at 12/32/09?
Objection.
So the question is that what he's considering?
Correct. In other words, was he basing his opinion or analysis on that time frame, at least in part?
So I'll let that question stand.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. If you were told that there was another interaction phone event on John O'Keefe's phone at 12/32/16 in the form of steps taken, 36 steps over the course of 83 feet, would that change your analysis or opinion in any way?
Objection.
I'll allow that in that form.
Yes.
In what way?
If the phone event moves from 12/32/09 to 12/32/16, then of the 30 possibilities I had in the chart, all of them would become positive. That would mean that that interaction occurs after the end of the vehicle event every single time. Instead of, it was 25 for 30 in the original analysis, the hypothetical would change it to 30 for 30.
All of them, all 30 of them, would occur at a point in time with, let me rephrase that, all of them would reflect a scenario in which the phone interaction took place after.
That's correct.
Thank you. If you were told, to give you another hypothetical, if you were told that there was a Doppler state event on the phone, pocket state event on the phone at 12/33/14, would that impact your opinion in any way?
Objection.
Sustained.
You were asked several questions about what you believed Mr. Burgess may have gotten wrong in terms of his original report and one of his original analyses dealing with bits and bytes. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did Mr. Burgess?
Hold on.
Of course.
You need to, you know, we have to turn the fans off.
And I'm not speaking loud enough.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'll raise my voice. I just don't want to scream over people, but I will raise my voice.
Let's try this for a few minutes.
May I start again?
That question, yes.
Thank you. You were asked about whether or not you believed that Mr. Burgess was incorrect in terms of certain analyses he undertook or reflected in his original report back in January of 2025, correct?
Correct.
As it relates to the bits and bytes, did you find that Mr. Burgess was incorrect or correct about his analysis concerning the size of the data set collected based on bits versus bytes?
He was incorrect.
Explain that to the jurors very briefly.
These are just different units. A bit is a different size than a byte. And so if a size for something is listed in bits, for example, and you look at the data and assume it's in bytes, you will assume it's the wrong size.
Which Mr. Burgess did based on your review of his report, correct?
Correct.
I want to change gears and ask a different question or series of questions about the text stream data versus the infotainment system data, specifically the timestamps associated therewith. Is there a timestamp associated with text stream data?
In this case, no.
Okay. Is there a timestamp associated with infotainment system data?
Yes.
All right. Infotainment system data. Well, let me ask it. Let me see if I can ask it a different way. Where did the 3-second delay come? Data. Well, let me ask it. Let me see if I can ask it a different way. Where did the 3-second delay come from? Your analysis of Mr. Burgess's review of the text stream data, or his review of the infotainment system data?
The 3 seconds came, well, fundamentally it came from the exemplar testing, where he identified, and he was actually, well, Aperture collectively in that testing identified a difference between when the button was pushed and the time that showed up in the infotainment. But they didn't actually look at, as far as I know, or at least it wasn't provided if they did, how that specifically related to the key on timer itself. But they showed that the button is pushed, there's a 3-second delay, and then the time gets logged.
When that button is pushed for the infotainment system, I'm going to rephrase again. When that button is pushed for the key on event, is that like a stopwatch? Click, a stopwatch starts running, timer?
In the VCH system, yes.
Okay. Separate and apart from the VCH system, is there an infotainment system that also has a timer or a clock on it?
Has a clock.
Are those two things independent of one another?
Completely independent.
What were you doing with regard to the 3-second delay as it relates to the key on event and the infotainment system event to marry those two things together?
Right. I'm making the adjustment, or proposing that adjustment can be made, because the key on timer is going to start generally as soon as the vehicle powers on. But the infotainment, when you go and download the data, it will say, hey, I think I powered on at this time, and it turns out that time is actually 3 seconds off. So if you're going to then apply the infotainment time anywhere else to VCH data, you've got to realign the two. And that's where the 3 seconds comes from, is these are independent data sources.
Did Mr. Burgess, to your review of his, insofar as your review of his analysis, his report is concerned, did he align the two with a 3-second delay?
No, he did not.
With the court's permission, may we have slide 10 of the PowerPoint of,
Okay.
and that is, we've talked a lot about PowerPoints of Mr. Disogra's PowerPoint. Can you highlight the table on the left, Mr. Wolk? Thank you. Did you create this table?
No.
Was this table, I don't know if you call it cut and paste or if there's some better engineering term for it, was it basically pulled from Mr. Burgess's report?
It was. It was a screenshot.
Thank you, screenshot. Did you type a single word on this?
I did not. I added a green box. Yes. I did not.
You were asked a ton of questions just a few minutes ago about whether or not the column on the left and the center column were reflective of an infotainment timestamp versus an iPhone to iPhone timestamp, correct?
That's right.
Mr. Brennan asked you a bunch of questions about that left column being an iPhone timestamp, at least the top 5 rows of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of it. Remember that?
Yes.
Read the name that Mr. Burgess labeled that column.
Infotainment call timestamps.
So what, as an expert, what did you presume he, as an expert, was presuming?
Objection.
Sustain.
What did you presume that meant to you, just to you?
Call timestamps from the infotainment.
So if anything is wrong with your analysis, would it be based on Mr. Burgess being wrong in his analysis?
Objection.
Sustain.
Just a moment, Your Honor.
Sure. Do you need the light on?
I don't. And we can pull that down. What was your entire analysis predicated on? What was it based on as you explained your analysis to Mr. during the course of the day?
The testing by Aperture and the collective reports and PowerPoint presentations by Aperture. That would be an initial report by Mr. Burgess, an initial PowerPoint by Dr. Welcher, and a supplemental report by Mr. Burgess.
Did you change any of their data?
No.
Did you change any of their analyses?
No.
Did you explain their analyses?
Yes.
Sustained, ask it to.
Sure. what were you trying to do in terms of your presentation, in your PowerPoint and your presentation to this?
There were a number of different methodologies presented across all of those reports and PowerPoints, and sort of all in different places. So my goal was to bring all of them into one place so we could look at the totality of the data.
You were asked whether the genesis of your analysis relies on knowing the source of the calls, correct? You remember being asked that by Mr. Brennan?
Yes,
The actual genesis of your entire opinion is based on Mr. Burgess's and Mr. Welcher's analyses, correct?
that's correct.
You were also asked why you believed Mr. Burgess did a quote-unquote more detailed report in May versus January of 2025. Do you remember being asked that just a few minutes ago?
Yes.
When you presented your analysis, your math, based on Mr. Burgess's January 2025 report, how many of the scenarios indicated, based on his data and his analysis, that the lock event occurred after the text stream?
All of them.
Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Brennan.
So, Mr. Disogra, this demonstrates the danger or the difficulty.
Hold on. Start the
It's
question
cross-examination.
differently.
This demonstrates the difficulty in giving opinions when you don't actually study the data itself. Isn't that fair to say?
What are you referring to with this?
Well, you're giving opinions, but you can't verify any of the data because you're not relying on your study of the data, are you?
I'm relying on expert reports.
You're criticizing somebody's report, but you yourself can't defend data that you haven't actually analyzed and broken down yourself.
I don't think that's true.
When you're looking at, put on your pen, please. When you're looking at someone's report, you're guessing as to what they thought or presumed if you haven't spoken to them.
I would say I'm reading the words that are in front of me and interpreting them for what they say.
When someone plugs their iPhone into a car after it turns on, and the car reads data that's on the iPhone, the data then resides on the infotainment system, correct?
There's a transfer of data.
And
Yes.
so unless you actually do the study yourself, you had no way of knowing if that information, although on the iPhone, on the infotainment system, you had no idea whether it was from an iPhone or from the.
That's right. I don't think that's.
And so when you don't actually do the work yourself, and you just presume or you guess, you could get it wrong, couldn't you?
If I had guessed, yes, but I didn't guess. I used the data in the reports and I referenced the testing that Aperture did. So I did not make a guess.
1 through 5, and you telling me right now, with a reasonable degree of data certainty, that that information is based on the infotainment clock. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
You don't know. But if you actually did the analysis yourself rather than just Monday morning quarterbacking somebody's report,
Objection.
So I'm going to strike it, ask it differently, Mr.
if you
Brennan.
actually did the, you wouldn't have to make a presumption that you'd be wrong, correct?
I don't think the analysis was possible in this case because the testing wasn't done in this case.
You don't know if the testing was done or not. You didn't do the testing.
So I need to hear the question.
You don't know if the testing was done or not, do you?
I know it's in the reports. The testing wasn't in the reports. No,
Did you read?
no,
You don't know if that
I don't.
I'm going to let that stand. Next.
I do not, sir.
assumptions and
Part of my conclusions would change. I wouldn't agree that I'm wholesale wrong.
well, as a scientist, if they're not accurate, that would be wrong, wouldn't it?
That might be a nuanced answer.
I'm sorry?
I said that might be a nuanced answer. Frankly, I'm not sure how to give you a good answer to that
If you
question.
have the wrong data when you're doing your analysis, then the final analysis is going to be wrong. If you have using the wrong data, it's that simple.
Yes,
Right? You don't have to be a scientist to figure that out.
yes, that's
Okay. If we could have Mr. Welcher's 33, you could open that up, please. You were asked about whether the windows within the time frame of 12/32/09, the last user interaction with the phone. When you look at this data, could you go to the top, please? You see on vehicle speed, the car is moving. You see that? Could you enlarge that a little bit, please? Beginning of that data capture, the car's already moving, correct?
I see vehicle speeds right in those first couple of lines. Yes,
Yes?
Yes, I see
Yes.
vehicle speed.
If you go to the bottom, at the end, the car is still moving. Yes?
I see vehicle speeds there as well.
2361. That would indicate, in your experience with text stream data, the car is still moving. Yes?
At the end of the record, there is a vehicle speed, the car is moving. That would be my assumption.
Okay. And so when you're making your conclusions that something's with or without, you're simply talking about the time of the 10 seconds of data. Yes?
Yeah, everything that I've done has been referencing the end of event 1162-2, which is exactly how it's been referenced in all of the other reports.
That 10-second window. Yes?
Not even the window, just the end. Everything in the Aperture reports talks about the end of event 1162-2. So that's what I used across everything.
And when you say end of event, you're referring just to data, not the actual real life event.
Yeah, absolutely. The end of the recording.
Okay. And so after that window, 12:32:04 to 12:32:12, you were asked a question about what might have happened 4 seconds later, 12:32:16. Remember you were asked about that?
Yes.
Did you know at 12:32:16 that John O'Keefe's cell phone moved for the last time? Did you know that?
No.
And between 12:32:12, which is in the 10-second window, and 12:32:16, do you know what John O'Keefe was doing in that 4-second period?
No.
Do you know if he was walking?
No.
Do you know if he was crawling?
No.
Do you know if he was falling?
No.
You don't know.
I do not know.
12:32:16.
I didn't review the phone data, so I don't know.
So that's sustained.
What about the data? What's wrong? Then you'd be wrong, correct?
Generally, yes.
Garbage in, garbage out. Basic scientific postulate, correct?
Generally, yes.
You're relying on whose data?
Mr. Burgess's data and Dr. Welcher's data.
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Disogra, you are all set, sir. So you can step down.